Hello everyone, I am Prabhat Kumar Chand from Indian Statistical Institute, Kolkata, is going to present our work Agent-Driven BFS Tree in Anonymous Graphs with Applications. It's a joint work with Manish Kumar of Indian Institute of Technology Madras and Anisur Rahman Molla of Indian Statistical Institute, Kolkata. Autonomous agents have recently emerged as a prominent research area due to their capability for independent action, which enables them for a decentralized decision making and task allocation, and therefore it finds use in diverse distributed applications. For example, autonomous agents can be used for real-time navigation and traffic management, route planning for self-driving cars, social network analysis, community detection, and bioinformatics. We now describe our model. We have a simple connected undirected annotated graph with n nodes and m edges. The nodes are anonymous and are memoryless. The edges coming out of a node are port numbered, and these edges serve as routes through which an agent can move. For the mobile agents, we have k greater than n number of agents, each with a unique ID. They have a limited memory, and multiple agents can reside on a node, but the agents cannot stay on the edges. The agents are synchronized to a common clock at the start, and they execute operation in synchronous rounds, and they can only communicate when they are present at the same node. So if one or more agents are present at the same node, only they can communicate and exchange information. The agents operate through a communicate, compute, and move cycle. So the agents communicate with other agents at the same node. Based on the communication received, they compute and then decide to move via a particular port. One CCM cycle is regarded as one round. We measure the time complexity of the algorithm as the number of rounds required to execute the algorithm, and the memory complexity as the number of bits needed per agent for the algorithm. In our model, we have three different types of starting configuration for the agents. So the first one is the rooted configuration, where all the k agents start at the designated root node. Next, we have the arbitrary initial configuration, where the agents are initially placed randomly in small clusters across different nodes of the graph. Finally, we have the dispersed initial configuration, where each node of the graph is occupied by at least one agent at the start, and if the number of nodes is equal to the number of agents, then there is exactly one node at each node of the graph. We now define our problem statement. We consider an n-node arbitrary simple anonymous graph G. We then study the complexity of constructing a breadth-first search tree on G using k greater than n mobile agents, where n is the number of nodes of G, based upon the starting configuration of the agents, whether it's rooted, arbitrary, or dispersed, whether the root of the BFS tree is known, or whether the number of agents is greater than n or equal to n. Here is the summary of the results that we have obtained in this paper. Our main algorithm, algorithm 1, constructs the BFS tree of G in order of d delta time, where d is the diameter of the graph and delta is the highest degree of a node in G. In algorithm 1, there are exactly n agents and the root of the BFS tree is known, and the robots initially begin at a dispersed initial configuration. Then we have some follow-up configuration based on the number of agents, whether the root is known or not, and the initial configuration of the robots. We then have the results of our applications. So first, we are able to check if a graph is bipartite or not, and this can be verified in additional of order of d plus delta rounds, and then we can gather the k agents at the root node of the graph in order of d rounds if we have a BFS tree already constructed. Here are some of the related works. A simple BFS tree construction in the synchronous message passing model, where flooding takes order of D rounds and have a message complexity of order of M messages. For agent-based model, we first have the work of Auerbach, who constructed a BFS tree using a single agent using an algorithm called strip explore and used an arbitrary undirected graph. The time complexity of his algorithm was order of m plus n to the power 1.5. In this algorithm, although a single robot performs the graph exploration, but the nodes are distinguishable. Next, we have the work of Palaniswamy, who divided the graph into clusters where agent performs the BFS sequentially for different clusters. So here the agents could communicate remotely without being co-located. So if the agents are not at the same node, even then also they could communicate with each other. So the time complexity of the algorithm was order of k times n plus m. Finally, we have the work of Keshvakalani et al., who gave a BFS based algorithm for the dispersion problem for k less than n agents. So basically, for the dispersion problem, the agents situated arbitrarily at different nodes of the graph have to be resituated in such a way that there is at most one agent at each node of the graph. So the author solved the dispersion problem using a BFS based algorithm. The time complexity of their algorithm was order of d delta times d plus delta, and the message complexity per agent was order of log d plus log k bits per agent. We now describe the main contribution of our paper, a BFS algorithm for the mobile agents, and starting with the dispersed initial configuration where a root node is already predefined. Our algorithm runs in two phases, where in phase 1, the agents compute the value of delta, which is then required in the next phase for the BFS tree construction. So initially, all the n agents occupy the n nodes of G, where each agent is present exactly at one node of the graph. So in this particular algorithm, as the root node is already defined, so the agent at the root node can initiate the algorithm by visiting its child node one by one and asking them to continue further exploration immediately upon meeting. So in this figure, as we can see, so R4 goes to R1 and then instruct R1 to explore further. In the next round, R1 explores R2 and similarly R4 again visits the robot R2. In this way, whenever a robot gets an instruction for further exploration, it immediately starts to explore its children. And as the exploration reaches the leaf nodes, or from where the further exploration is not necessary, the agents then begin to inform the degree value that they have collected from their children. So in this figure, we can see that the robot at R5, after seeing that it has no new nodes further to discover, so it begins to inform the collected value of the degree. So now it informs the degree it has to its parent R1. Similarly, R1 waits till it collects all the degree information from its children, and after getting all the degree information from the children, then R1 computes the maximum degree received from its children and the degree of itself, and then further communicates it to the parents. Now the root agent R4 waits till it gets all the degree information from its children and then computes the maximum degree received from the children with the degree of itself and thereby establishes the maximum degree of the graph delta. The root then communicates this delta to all the agents via the newly created tree. We can see that the tree created in phase 1 may not represent a BFS tree for the graph G. So the time complexity of executing phase 1 is order of d delta rounds, and the memory requirement is order of log n bits per agent. This phase already assumes a pre-designated root node for G, although the knowledge of any other global parameter is not required. As we have already seen, that tree from phase 1 may not be a BFS tree, and after computing the value of delta, the algorithm then proceeds to phase 2, where it actually constructs a BFS tree for the graph G. Now the algorithm moves to phase 2, where the agents compute a BFS tree starting from the root node. Now the agent at the root node R4 visits each of its adjacent nodes one by one. So when it visits its adjacent nodes and finds a agent there, it requests the agent to become its children. So if it is successful in becoming its children, then newly visited agent becomes the child, marks its level as 1, and considers R4 as its parent. So in this way, the algorithm visits each of the children. Here after R1 it visits R2 and then to R3, and in a similar way ask each of these newly visited agents to become the children of R4. So contrary to the algorithm in phase 1, here whenever a new agent gets a visit from the parent for the first time, it does not immediately starts exploring its children. Instead, it waits for 2 delta rounds before exploring its own children to ensure proper synchronization between the different BFS levels. An agent at level I who has just discovered a new unvisited agent as its children assigns it a level of I plus 1. In this figure, we can see that the first 2 delta rounds have elapsed, and now in the next 2 delta rounds, R1 and R2 are visiting R5 parallelly, and in the same time span, R3 is visiting its neighbor R2. Now, if a situation arises when an agent is receiving multiple requests from multiple agents to become a child, it then only accepts the request of the agent that has the least ID. So in this figure, R5 is getting request to become a child from both R1 and R2 at the same time, but R5 will accept the request of R1 since R1 is the agent with the least ID. Now the algorithm continues, and in the current phase of 2 delta rounds, every agent at level 1, particularly in this figure R1, R2 and R3, has completed visiting all its adjacent nodes and marking the necessary nodes as their children. And the new agents that have become the children of R1, R2 or R3 have got the level of level 2. The agents that have no more children to explore mark themselves as completed and gives the completion information to their parents. An agent, when it receives the completion information from each of its children, mark itself as completed and then informs about the completion to its parents. In this way, when the root agent receives the completion messages from each of its children, the algorithm in phase 2 terminates. So finally, after the execution of phase 2, we are left with a BFS tree of the graph G. Now to analyze phase 2, we see that the value of delta that was obtained from phase 1 helps to synchronize the exploration between different BFS levels. The time complexity of phase 2 is order of d delta rounds, and the memory requirement per agent is order of log n bits. So we have the following theorem. Given an arbitrary simple connected graph G with n nodes and m edges, maximum degree delta and diameter d, then a BFS tree can be constructed in order of d delta rounds from the root node when such a node is known as a prior, and the n agents begin in a dispersed initial configuration with order of log n bits of memory per agent. The agents do not require any prior knowledge about any global parameters. Now, to construct a BFS tree for other static configuration, we use the main result we just established. So, For the rooted initial configuration, we first disperse the robot, and since the root is known, we now then use our main algorithm to construct the BFS tree. When we have the arbitrary configuration and the root is known, then we first disperse the robots and then construct the BFS. When the root is unknown, we use a leader election procedure to find the root first, and then we construct the BFS tree post dispersion. When the number of agents k is greater than the number of nodes n, the algorithms perform similarly, except for the fact that here the rest of the agents, that is k minus n agents, sit and rest at the root while the other agents perform the algorithm. We now come to the applications part. Now we check a graph for its bipartiteness using mobile agents. So post the construction of the BFS tree, each agent at each node now knows its level. So the even level agents color themselves as white while the other agents color themselves as black. Now the white agents check their neighbors, and if a neighbor is also white or the neighbor is empty, then the graph cannot be bipartite. Now if an agent finds out that none of its neighbor is white or empty, then the graph may be bipartite. Now the agent propagates this local information of being bipartite or not to the whole graph, and if each and every agent report bipartiteness, and then the graph becomes bipartite. Now this algorithm runs in order of delta plus d rounds with the BFS already constructed. As the second application, we show that the gathering of agents could be easily performed if the BFS tree of the graph is already known. So the gathering begins at the leaf nodes of the BFS with the agents moving to get collected at their parents. Now any agent, once it receives each of its children, moves to its own parent along with the collected set of children. Therefore, the gathering completes when the agent at the root node receives all of its children along with their respective accumulated agents. So, the gathering takes order of d rounds to complete. So, to conclude, in this paper, we provided a BFS tree construction algorithm for the dispersed initial configuration with the root known and the number of agents being exactly equal to the number of nodes of the graph. So our algorithm operates in order of d delta rounds and uses an order of log n bits of memory per agent. Using this algorithm, we also investigated and solved the other starting configuration of the robots. We then applied our BFS to check for graph bipartiteness and the gathering of mobile agents. Determining lower bounds for time and memory complexity could be a work for the future, and another future direction is evaluating the problem's efficacy with faulty robots, considering both crash faults and Byzantine faults. Thank you so much.